Perfectionist Musicians Podcast. Take action to find healthy perfectionism. Discussions about the background of successful careers in music performance, arts and science.
After talking about tips for freelancers, now I ask Ollie Mansfield about how can those young musicians find employment as soon as possible who have freshly graduated from a music college. Ollie had some great ideas regarding this, and he talked about how important it is to build a strategy for your job seeking. This plan may cover to strengthen the way you see yourself, also to explore your true interests, because this is how you will be prepared for the best and the worst case scenarios without feeling panicky. Ollie also talks about useful practices in instrumental teaching, which might be helpful to you in case you decide to take that route. We talked about seeking employment, either freelance or orchestra work. What about other things you think that are issues for graduates these days?
So it's been really interesting. Someone else got in contact with me recently because they decided to specialize in contemporary music and chamber music. And then their quartet broke up. They didn't have the contacts and network to sort of do the kind of bread and butter freelance orchestral playing. So I think number one is being prepared to do different things, and that to make up your identity. The other thing I think is important is to experiment and see what works and what doesn't, and to be okay with that. Only in the last few years that I've started doing that.
Okay, if someone like that goes in to see you, what do you say? What do you tell them?
Okay. It's exploring, first of all, what ideas they have, if any, and kind of what they're passionate about, what they're really interested in. And then it's unpicking that and unfolding it. So, for instance, if it's someone who really wants to do orchestral work and freelance orchestral work, so it's then building a strategy of how to go about building that. And that could be to do with who you're going to go in contact and play to, how you're going to structure your practice and your work to help with that. So, for instance, the free website Download Music, ISMLP, I think it is. And there are so many orchestral parts on there that you can just download and practice and learn them. So you don't even have to wait to be sent the parts. You can go away and learn all 9 Beethoven Symphony cello parts right now, if you want, completely for free. So it's coming up with a strategy like that. And then it's seeing what other work that would help you, one, bring in just an income, first of all, but that also connects with your identity as a musician. So could it be the teaching? Could it be arranging? Could it be writing? And just seeing what other avenues there are, what other skills you could develop and use. But more than not, when people come to me, it's about creating a really clear action plan and a strategy. And then if there are blocks anywhere, it's then to go in on a deeper level and just check out what are the beliefs and values behind what the identity is. And also when I'm working with people, I'm listening to their language, I'm looking at their non-verbal communication, because all of that can say a lot about unconsciously where someone's at.
Absolutely. This work plan, actually, that you talked about is basically teaching and having the approach of not letting your emotions overwhelm you, but keep yourself, stand on the ground and use your logical and realistic sense. And actually, this is what sports psychologists do to performance science and sports psychology when, for instance, a swimmer is swimming for the Olympic medal. So what will happen if you discover that that competitor is in front of you? Instead of having a panic attack and losing the ability of physically do what he trained for years, got plans in the head, in their mind, take out the plan and adopt it and just to follow it. And actually what you said is, again, having plans and not letting your emotions really overwhelm you. I mean, because emotions are not realistic, they're absolutely subjective. I was dealing a lot with perfectionism, and I I realized how subjective is that. And we will shortly talk about performance anxiety, and it's also extremely subjective, and it's extremely egotistic.
Yes.
It's having a very narrow mindset. I mean, you just look at the very problem, but you don't seek the solutions if you're in that mindset. And what you teach is nothing else but opening up and basically observing yourself from a little bit outside.
Yeah, it totally is. And again, there's a belief in me that actually they already have the answers. And again, so much of the training is focused on the actual playing and the creating of the music. But it's the holistic, it's the whole approach, it's the human behind it, it's everything in there that is really important to how one develops and progresses in their career as well. And it is quite simple, but yeah, it's just form a strategy, an action strategy, but it's based on the individual, on the person, what they want and what they desire. And it's them sort of realizing actually what they're capable of. And all I do is just shine lights here and there, pinpoint or just offer a possibility to change the thought process.
Just mentioning performance anxiety, I know that you also, as a coach, you help musicians to tackle their performance anxiety. How or in which forms do musicians experience performance anxiety, and what techniques do you use to reduce the anxiety level?
Yeah, just one really basic one is just making sure they're breathing, because it is amazing just physiologically that holding the breath, what the breath does. But on a more experimental level is to do with, again, the work I did with Matt Hudson. And he came up with an approach that deals with EMIs, emotional memory images. And his approach is that your brain and your body is physiologically responding to image in your mind when it comes to performance anxiety, or actually lots of other things. So if subconsciously you have, let's say, an image that is quite overwhelming in your head, that seems quite scary, then your brain and your body will respond to that. So then if you can change the image, you can change the brain chemistry and the physiological impact of the body. So what I then work with clients of mine is to get them to become aware of what image on their screen they might have. And then it's playing around and adjusting it to something that can be more helpful.
It's interesting that you are saying that musicians would see images, because my experience, and also from others, I learned that musicians tend to listen to their own voice, or actually other voices in their heads. So it's more like an oral influence.
Yeah. So what I'm finding is there may be a dominance, whether it's visually or orally or kinesthetically, but within that is there will be some sort of, on a subconscious level, there's usually some sort of visual that they're responding to. And that's where the eye accessing cues are really interesting to sort of identify that. So within Matt Hudson's method, if someone thinks about their performance anxiety, the idea is that you'll be accessing with your eyes subconsciously some sort of image in your mind, which your brain and your body then respond to. So your performance anxiety is being caused by some sort of subconscious image that then your brain and your body responds to, causing your performance anxiety. So if you change the image, the brain and body response to it.
Does it work with your clients?
Yes. And it's fun to do. And then it's bringing in some of the language and the hypnosis stuff to get it to last. So sometimes it can be great for that one session, but it's getting it to work in multiple contexts. And with all these different ways of going about it, as long as you believe it without any doubt, then whatever you use will stick, essentially. I'm not one of these people that think, well, this is the only way to do it. I think there are so many ways to go about doing it. It's just finding what strategy, what method will work for that particular person.
What are the issues at those musicians who report being anxious on stage or prior to performance? What do they say? Is it physiological, the body issues, or?
Yeah, that's how they notice it. So it's whether it's tightness of breath, tightness in the muscles, shaking, having memory blanks, intonation issues, tonal issues. There are a variety of ways that...
But isn't that mostly a consequence of their state that they have intonation issues?
I think that when you're experiencing performance anxiety, that the physiological response can hamper all of those things. So I think you could be really well prepared and play beautifully in tune, but if you're in a moment of performance anxiety, that can go. You know, I worked with a singer a month ago who just said she just couldn't breathe. And again, we played around with some of the emotional memory image stuff. And what's fascinating, again, and it comes down to sometimes it's a case about identity and beliefs and values.
It's amazing that you also say very similar stuff that actually what came out from my own research. I was looking at how the musician's self-concept affects their perfectionism, their performance anxiety, and it's so strongly linked.
Yeah.
It is really defining everything in your musicianship.
Yeah. It's usually a particular moment where someone has said something. It's when either a parent or a teacher or someone of influence has done or said something that creates a lasting impression.
Or a series of these things.
Yeah, or a series, yeah. I did have one, and I've completely forgotten it because I've worked on it. All I remember is someone wrote something in a report, an exam feedback.
I remember that very well. I'm not going to saying it, but I remember that. And that was appalling, sorry.
Yeah.
How can someone say something like that? Officially in a music college.
Yeah, but generally I've forgotten it now, which is great because before I could recite that word for word, but I have forgotten it. That's really cool. So I worked with a cellist. For her, it was a masterclass with a principal cellist of an orchestra who said something quite cutting. And, you know, and it's then just sort of getting rid of that and sorting it. And there are different ways and different methods, as you know, of going about it, whether it's NLP or hypnosis or other methods. And it's just a case of the individual finding what works for them, what's going to give them the biggest belief that it's sorted.
If someone doesn't have the financial background to go to see a therapist, how can you change your approach to how can you get rid of these bad experiences?
Okay. Have you ever heard of the phrase skin in the game? You've got to have skin in the game. I believe that in order to really get the most out of something, you need to have to contribute something to it so that it matters to you to get the results. So if you do something for free, you are less likely to see something through because you haven't actually put something that you value into it.
That sounds very materialistic to me. Seriously, sometimes you just don't have the time or the money right at that moment, but you really want to make a change. I mean, how can you change? With the other podcast guests, we were talking about accepting who you are, where you are. If you don't accept something, you are frustrated. I mean, that's my suggestion. But I was asking you, maybe you can add something else from your side.
There are definitely books and all sorts of things out there and all sorts of YouTube videos. So one that's helped me the most is The Saboteur Within by Matt Hudson. And that is great because it's a great read and there's lots of exercises in it. And it's a very sort of cheap way of going about making some change. I think the acceptance part is a big one that I did naturally myself. It got to a certain point where I was like, you know what, let's just accept me and the situation. And honestly, that did help a huge amount. And the other is just being really grateful. being really grateful for the skill and the value we have, and being really grateful for working with other people when the opportunity comes, and let them know that, And even with my teachers, I'm incredibly grateful for what they've taught me. And whenever possible, I share that with them, because everyone is always doing their best. And that's the other thing that has really helped me, is just recognizing that everyone is always doing their best.
So do you. I'm talking to those who are listening to this, that you're always doing the best.
Yeah, exactly. And to be grateful for that, and to realize that, and to value that. And the best can change each day, or in each moment, and that's fine. But and it's also remembering with others that they are also doing their best. And for me, that sort of brings a nice sense of calmness and peace about that.
Cool. Let's change topic. I know how much you are passionate about teaching, and now you have over 15 years of experience in teaching the cello. What would you conclude? What are the do's and don'ts of an excellent music teaching practice?
That's a great question. Biggest one is to keep progressing, keep developing. As a teacher, as a musician, is keep exploring new ways to teach, to share, to help other people. Because that stimulates and keeps my interest, but also keeps things fresh and possibilities open. So for instance, I'm always sort of watching on YouTube amazing cellists that do masterclass and things like that, and learning about how they approach teaching the repertoire, how they approach bowing, setting up the left hand, and trying things out, trying what images they use, metaphors they use in my teaching, and seeing what works and what doesn't. I'm constantly sourcing ideas to use. And I think that's really important, to keep the feeling like you're moving on, because there have been times in the last 15 years where I felt quite stuck in a rut, where I've been quite overwhelmed by the feeling that I could just stay teaching at a particular school for the rest of my life if I wanted to. And so for me, it's finding the ways of where I can progress and develop. So that's my key bit, is as a musician, as a teacher, explore new ways to keep your interest and your development and learning going.
When you are with a student, so what you find the best way of dealing with the student? The way you talk, the way you question, the way you criticize?
Yeah. Then the second thing that I think is really important is building a genuine connection, rapport with your student. And what I mean by that is where you really are with them as another person who you genuinely care about. You care about them as a person, and you're there to nurture and work with them. When I work with someone, no matter what age, I ask them at the beginning of the lesson, how are they? What's been going on? How's their week been? And one, that's just building that personal connection. But two, I'm seeing, has there been anything that's been happening that might have gotten in the way of their practice or their playing, or, if they're having a stressful week, that tells me that we might need to look at some body stuff and releasing tension and all of that. And then I ask them, is there anything in particular they want to work on specifically in the lesson? Because the thing is, the lessons aren't about me, it's about them. That if there's something in particular they want to do in the lesson or they want covering, that I know about that so I can incorporate that into their lesson. I think it's really important that the focus is on their needs and what they want. And this, again, applies in so many different contexts, is when you feel that you have a connection and you feel safe in someone's environment, then you're more likely...
You mean that students feel safe in the teacher's environment?
Yeah, they're more likely to play well and develop and to learn. If they're in a state of fear and feeling scared, then body-wise, there's going to be tension that's going to affect their playing, but also they're not going to be in a good place to learn and absorb and progress.
How a music teacher working one-on-one can recognize that something went wrong, perhaps subconsciously terrified the students. So what are the signs by your own behavior that you prevent the bigger damage?
Yeah. So one is silence. If there is a lot of silence and not much facial expression on the student and a slight resistance to engage in different activities, then they're all tell signs for me that they are not feeling safe enough to contribute. And the thing is, because I also ask a lot of questions in my lessons, and if they're not feeling they're able to contribute, then I know that there's some work to do in the rapport building, the relationship building. Equally, just to caveat that though, there may be a question that they may generally not know how to answer it. And that could also be a possibility as well. But you can kind of sense when someone feels comfortable, and it's kind of like an energy thing, and it's all the non-verbals. You know, you can tell when someone's tight and scared, and you can tell when someone's more at ease. And then, you know, if it's affecting body, it'll affect the instrument as well.
And your cognitive focusing skills.
Exactly. So a huge part of my teaching is actually just building genuine relationships, you know, and I really care. What I have had to work on is not caring too much. And when I first started teaching, if something went wrong and didn't quite go right for the student, I would beat myself up terribly about it.
Yeah, you were angry with yourself, you mean?
Yeah, because I'd let them down. Again, it's going back to that everyone's doing their best. And I was able to take that pressure off. So building that rapport and that connection. So there's the language. Again, you asked about feedback. There's the growth mindset, which I think is a really good basis. The Carol Dweck's growth mindset is a really good basis to look at how you can use your language and how to structure your feedback.
How you can explain the student that this is just the moment, this is the present, and the future holds something else. And you can grow as everyone else can grow. Like basically you are trying to change the approach again of the student.
Yes, exactly. And then with that, and I think it's so important, keeping the doors open of possibility for the students. So if, for instance, I have a student that is having trouble being able to put their fingers and thumb on the bow in a particular way, I'm not the type of person who goes, right, well, that's it. They're never going to be able to hold the bow again. No, I revisit things quite regularly to give the opportunity them to walk through the door and get it. So it's always keeping the options and opportunities open so that when they're ready, they can get it. And again, it's not getting frustrated with them or me that they haven't quite got something. It's just maybe I haven't delivered it in the way that is best for them, or maybe they're just not ready yet to receive that information.
So you don't blame the student. You are finding out something from your side, what you have done wrong or what you can do in a different way in the future.
Yeah, exactly. But there are times when it is important to, I think, challenge, especially if you think it could be a lack of concentration in a student. But there are ways of going about it that aren't accusatory.
Yes.
So, for instance, at the moment, I have one where I had a lesson and we were working on a particular passage and the student played it through the first time and they got a bit muddled with the note. We stopped and we went through it and we went through a few little strategies of working out what the notes were and how to do it on the cello. And the student could then do it. So then I said, right, well, now play it from a bit before and see how it goes. And they played it and then they made the same mistake. And so we talked about it through the steps again, went back to just before, got them to play it, and they played the same mistake. And I thought, but they do know how to do it because when we've isolated it, they've been able to do it. So I said, well, it feels like we're doing a spelling test. And I'm asking you to spell cat, and you spell it C-O-T. And I point it out to you, and we go through it, and you realize, oh, no, it's C-A-T. And I ask you, and you know it's C-A-T. And they go, yeah, I know it's C-A-T. So, and then I say, so then I get you to spell cat, and then you spell cot again. And then I have to tell you that, do you remember we talked about it, CAT and blah, blah, and then by now they're starting to smile because they're realizing that actually they do know how to spell cat. It's a concentration thing. And so they can relate it back to their music and what we've just done, and they know they can do it, but it was a concentration thing. So once I've told them that little story and they're laughing, and again, laughter is really important for getting some good chemistry going and getting some good learning.
It's not just the chemistry between two of you, it's the chemistry within the student's body.
Yes,
that
exactly.
happiness versus fear, being just there, not fearing anything, helps focusing and the learning process.
Yeah, totally. And so then I got the student to play from the bit we'd just done, and having highlighted the concentration aspect, they were then able to do it fine. And so it is that balance of sometimes it is the responsibility of the student to apply the right kind of concentration to get the results. But there are ways of going about it that can be humorous.
Cool. That was so wonderful to listen to all of these. And thank you very much, Ollie Mansfield.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope it's of some use to people out there. But yeah, just keep smiling, keep doing your best.
So, it is a fact that these days, performance-based education and training in classical music does not provide graduates with the requisite skills to achieve a sustainable career. Even research showed that besides their artistic training, music students would like to learn more business and other non-musical skills as well. I hope that in these 2 episodes with Ollie Mansfield, you managed to find some ideas that can be useful to you, either you are starting a freelance performing career or you wish to teach in the future. Whichever career path you will take on, always remember that moving on and getting experience helps you to develop, since we can learn from our own mistakes too. And this way, until the next episode, I wish you well to remember that done is better than perfect.